So, hello and welcome again today to another Dark Academia book discussion. Tonight we're going to discuss Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This is the European English version. Apparently there's also an international one. I'm not sure what the difference really is, but this is the one that you get if you go into a bookshop in the UK. Now, this is the age of the internet. So I've been able to find so many interviews with Leigh Bardugo on YouTube, podcasts, screencasts, and I would invite you all to go and check those out. I may add a couple of links because there are so many that I watched where I was like, whoa, she is just a very, very interesting person. She has a lot to say on many, many different topics. But of course, first and foremost, she's talking about being a writer. Now, I came to her through dark academia, but I have also learned that Leigh Bardugo is a writer of young adult fiction, Six of Crows, and other books. And I understand that one of these books or book series has already been turned into a Netflix series. Now, this in and of itself is quite awesome to me and awe-inspiring because you have not only a published author of, at this stage, I want to say about 10 to 12 books. A new one is coming out in 2024, and I've already seen the blurb on this one. It's a historical fantasy standalone novel in Spain, set in Spain. I want to say 18th century Spain. Or was it 17th century? No, I think it was 17th because it's the post-Armada timeline, as it were. And of course, she's also written, and I think this is an adult book. Ninth House is definitely an adult book as well. It is the first in the Alex Stern trilogy. The second one is called Hellbent. I want to say that Hellbent came out at the beginning of 2023. This one is 2019, so it came out way before COVID. Yeah, in 2019 it was first published in Great Britain. Yeah, and it's copyright Leigh Bardugo 2019. And I've also read Hellbent. I actually finished it today, but I don't want to talk about Hellbent today. I want to talk about Hellbent in a separate video. Now, first of all, this book clocks in at around 130,000 words. It's pretty much as long as Dead Zone by Stephen King. And for some reason, as I was reading this book, Dead Zone kept popping into my head. The book itself is dark academia for various reasons. Number one, it's set in Yale University, which is also Leigh Bardugo's alma mater. It deals with the secret societies of Yale. Leigh Bardugo herself was a member, and I guess you never lose the membership of Wolf's Head. There's also Skull and Bones, manuscript, etc., Aurelian. There are the main 8 ancient, and when I say ancient for a European, if somebody says, oh, it's ancient in the United States, it's 19th century. For us, it's not ancient until it's like 600-700 years old. But the ancient houses, and then there's a 9th house called Lethe, which I don't think exists in reality. This is basically a fictional house which checks up on what the other houses are up to. And I'm going to stop putting up this book because I'm going to show it back here. The protagonist of the series is Galaxy Alex Stern, a girl of about, I want to say 18, with a really bad life. And we learn about her past in flashbacks, while we also hear about her present at Yale as the main story. So you do not have like 2 bracketing elements telling about the past, or 2 bracketing elements talking about the present, and then her past being couched between these 2, but it's told in flashbacks, which most writers don't pull off well. I always get lost when people start doing flashbacks, especially if you then bring in a second protagonist, in this case, Daniel Arlington, also known as Darlington, who also is given a POV section where we learn about his story in flashbacks. Usually, authors mess this up. It gets really confusing, but Leigh Bardugo is actually a great author because she manages to pull this off without confusing me. Um, but I will not actually tell the story and give you the synopsis in the way it's written because that would be way too complicated. And I'm no Leigh Bardugo to pull this off, but I'm just going to tell you the story that as it happens in chronological order. So as of now, there's going to be spoilers. But TLDR, who would like this book? You're going to like this book if you like dark academia, if you like books like the Rivers of London series, and if you can deal with a protagonist that is a lot like Lisbeth Salander in the Millennium trilogy, because she really reminds me of her. She really, really does. She has an equally messed up past. She's an equally messed up character. So that was kind of the vibes that I was getting. So if you could imagine taking the Rivers of London, magic, mixing Lisbeth Salander into this picture, and then transporting all of them to Yale, that's what you're in for. So, what is the story about? The story is, as I said, about Alex Stern, who, from a very young age, realized that she could see dead people. She can see ghosts. Ghosts in this world are real, but they have a couple of things that they cannot do. They cannot really interact with humans. They can't touch them. And humans can't hear them, and most of us can't see them. Alex can see them, and Alex is the only one, and she's obviously also bothered by this because she doesn't in the beginning realize that she's seeing people who nobody else sees, and she talks to people, and then other people kind of go, oh my God, what's wrong with this child? She's talking to somebody who isn't there. The problem is also that she sees people in what they were like the moment they died. So she sees road accident victims with bashed in heads. She sees stab wounded victims, people who've been shot, people who've been disemboweled. You know, it's terrifying. It would be terrifying for anyone, but we have a small child whose only anchor point is the grandmother, who has some kind of magical powers or supernatural powers of her own. She's able to see the future, but unfortunately she dies very, very early on. And so Alex is left with a mother who is completely out of her depth. She's like looking for salvation in crystals, reading the tarot or having the tarot read to her. You know, she's like somebody who's into beads and that kind of thing. And she cannot give her daughter the help that she needs. She doesn't have the money to cushion her daughter and to give her even just the basics with regard to enough food on the table and stuff, enough schooling, enough shelter, because money is important. You know, if you cannot give your children, and in the United States, it's different than here in Germany, for example, because the public school system in Germany is really good. So if you go to a public school, you'll be fine. In America, you know, it's better if you can pay for private tuition and stuff. But that's not on the cards for Alex. And then one day, Alex has the very unfortunate and very graphically described, incident happened to her that she is raped by a ghost while she's on a school trip. And I will say this up front, there is a lot of sexual violence in the book. It's never gratuitous. It's always there for a reason, but it's there. So you have been warned. You need to bear this in mind. This is definitely not for children. This is an adult's book. And basically, she has a breakdown after that, which is totally understandable. But the problem is that her best friend at school moves away from her mentally, and then later on also physically distances herself from her because she can't cope with this. I mean, we're talking about 11-year-old children, and then there's this girl that's raped in a public toilet, in a butterfly sanctuary kind of thing. So I mean, terrible. But the problem is also that nobody sees the perpetrator because the perpetrator is a ghost and no one can see him. And so she starts down a road of, playing truant, substance abuse. She falls in with the wrong crowd. She falls in with a dealer who she starts having a sexual relationship with at age 14. And she basically, he sends her out on school campuses to sell dope, but she also consumes. And then there's a girl that she meets, Heli, and she comes from a very different background. Helena comes from as we say, intact family, house of their own, back garden, going to good schools, being a sports person, playing softball, surfing, that kind of thing. But she falls in with them, and her and Len, who is this dealer boyfriend, I don't want to even call him boyfriend because this is not a love story, and he doesn't behave like you would want a partner to behave towards anyone. He's not a boyfriend, he's an abuser. And he falls in with, again, the wrong crowd. There is like a kind of a very important drug dealer called Eitan, or Eitan. He's Israeli. I don't really know how to pronounce his name. And this Eitan has a cousin, Ariel, and who comes over and he's a man as well, Ariel, not the mermaid. And he comes over from Israel, and he's known for aberrant behavior, or shall we say deviant behavior, in the worst kind of sense. And even Eitan doesn't want to be around his cousin. So he basically sends him to Len's, Heli's, and Alex's place to have some fun. And Len wants this because he's hoping that if he can keep Ariel entertained, Eitan will let him in on the good stuff, will give him a cut of the good jobs, of where the money is, because Eitan is a criminal and he's a drug dealer, but he's really well off. He has a very nice house somewhere in Encino Hills, I believe, and he's rich. And Len really wants in on that action. And so, but Heli and Alex have only heard bad things about Ariel, and they don't really want to play along. So they decide to run away. They've run away before. They made it as far as Vegas, but they always had to return because they have no money, no future. I mean, Alex hasn't even finished school, so they are really at rock bottom. I mean, it's a terrible situation that they're in. And also at least Alex is a drug addict, so it's, if she's not with Len, she's cut off from her supply because she doesn't have money to pay rent and food and to pay for some dope as well. So the two of them go to a movie, and Alex falls asleep. Heli doesn't. Heli goes back to the flat because she believes that she needs to be with Ariel to kind of offer herself up, whatever you want to call it, sacrifice herself, so that Alex and Len can kind of, make it. And unfortunately, during all of that, Heli dies of fentanyl poisoning, of a fentanyl overdose. And then the next morning, because at some point Alex returns as well, The next morning, the cops come in and they find Ariel dead, Helly dead, Len dead, and another guy called Betcher dead as well. And some of them have been staked. They have been beaten to a pulp with some kind of stick or bat. And there is Alex. She's unconscious when the cops find her. She has no blood on her. She has no residue of any kind on her. They even check the drains. She hasn't washed off the blood either. So they're like, okay, she's unconscious. She's high on fentanyl. And they are not sure what to do with her. They don't know if she's a victim or if she just managed to escape or somehow went unnoticed. And she ends up in hospital. And then she meets somebody named Dean Sandow. And Dean Sandow is a dean at Yale University, and he's also the praetor of Lethe House. And Lethe House, for some reason, has known about her ability to see dead people, they're called greys, all along. And they offer her a job. They offer her a full scholarship to Yale and recruit her into Lethe House. And this is then, and she basically agrees because he says, I can make all of this go away. You will be given a full scholarship, board, everything that you need. You have to come to work for us because we know what you can do. And she agrees. I mean, who wouldn't? And so she ends up in Yale. And this is where the whole dark academia starts. You have the academic background. You have a tight-knit Ivy League group of people. And you have the outsider coming in. And boy, is she an outsider. And then she basically, we then flash to, or I will now give you a kind of like, this is her past. Now we're going to come to the present, as it were, in the book. In Yale, there are secret societies. Now, I was like, okay, how can they be so secret if everybody knows about them? Because the way they're described in the book, it seems like they are student societies, like, you know, Alpha, Beta, Kappa, Theta, whatever. How are they secret? Especially since, according to the book, they have buildings called tombs, which are huge, grand buildings in the middle of Yale University campus, and everybody knows that they're there. I'm like, that's not a secret society. To me, a secret society is just that. It's a society that people don't talk about. People don't know that they exist, and it's like Fight Club. You don't talk about Fight Club, you know. And then I watched an interview with Leigh Bardugo where she said, well, they came about because at some point, everything that was Masonic was discredited in the United States. But people went to Yale and they were like, well, but I still want to kind of like have my rituals and stuff. So they founded those societies, and these societies are real. And their buildings really are called tombs. And I saw a YouTube video with an interview with her, and somebody interspliced the video part with pictures of those tombs. I can't use them because I haven't found any stock images of the tombs that are royalty free, but you can look them up yourselves. And they do look like tombs, and they are really ugly. I mean, some of them are so ugly, but the way they look are really like, they look like huge tombs, mausoleums without any windows. And that's where the rituals happen. And this is all true. The only thing that isn't true about them is, of course, that they don't have magic. But in this book, they do. Each of these 8 societies has a brand of magic that is unique to them. So we've got manuscript. They deal with anything to do with glamour. So that's where you would find the people who want to become film people, that kind of thing. So it's all about make-believe. Then you've got Skull and Bone, and they basically work in the field of prognostication, amongst other things. So what they do is they cut up people, live people, and they read their entrails. You know, and this is actually how this book starts out, with a reading of entrails in the tomb of this particular secret society. And they basically use the entrails of this live person to predict stock prices. Um, you know, and so you have all of these, and they all have their own particulars and fields of expertise. You have St. Elmo's, they specialize in weather magic, but they don't have a tomb because I forget, I think theirs was destroyed or something happened. So they are looking for a tomb. And each of these tombs is based on a nexus because for some reason New Haven and Yale are magical in the book. So this is how this works. For some reason, they are extremely magical, you know. And Lethe, which is actually Greek, and it's the name of a river. It's the river of forgetfulness, and Lethe is the antagonist of Mnemosyne. Mnemosyne is the goddess of remembrance, and Lethe is the goddess or the demon, depending on how you look at it, of forgetfulness. So you cross the Lethe, or the waters of Lethe are what you immerse yourself in order to forget. So that's a very interesting choice of name here. I haven't found any information on why she chose that name, and nobody's ever asked her, which is a pity because I would have wanted to know why she came up with that name. Because Lethe doesn't really have anything to do with forgetting, except that they may be the ones that try to keep everything under wraps. So yeah, make everybody else forget. And Lethe is basically there to oversee all of these rituals and make sure that the other societies don't overstep their boundaries, because let's face it, these people are between 17 and 21. You know, hormones are flying. It's the richest of the rich that go to Yale. So they're all entitled, they're all privileged, and they know no measure and no bounds. And basically, when you are in this society and you suddenly get access to magic, I mean, you're an entitled brat to begin with. Now imagine what it means if such an entitled brat got power that isn't just money and influence and your name, but also supernatural power. You definitely need somebody to keep them in check or keep an eye on them, and that's what Lethe does. Now, Alex becomes the Dante. So basically, this harks back to the trip that Dante takes into hell, and he's led by Virgil. So Dante is being introduced to hell by Virgil. So that's the way the story goes. So she's Dante, and she's got a Virgil named Daniel Arlington, also short Darlington. And he is the golden boy of Lethe. He's like a gentleman. You know, he really believes that Lethe are the soldiers that keep everybody else in check. It's a noble cause that he's fighting for, or that Lethe stands for. Then we have Dawes, Pamela Dawes. She's the oculist. She's like a scribe, the scholar, the person who does the research. And she's an eternal PhD candidate. So apparently she's been working on her thesis since before forever, so probably for about 4 to 5 years. And that's the main cast of characters. And so we follow the story of Alex as she's being inducted into her role and into what Lethe does by Virgil Darlington. He's got an interesting backstory as well, which I won't go into. But he's kind of tied. He's old money as well, and he's tied to a house. Because this was built by his ancestors, that's where he spent his youth with his grandfather, because his parents were terrible to him. And his grandfather said, "You have to keep this house intact." So it's basically this huge mansion, but he's basically stopped looking after most of it. He's just basically concentrating on a couple of rooms there, and he's a scholar. He's an intelligent young man, and basically he was very alone as a child, so he started reading. He also wanted to believe that magic was real, so he did a lot of dabbling. He nearly killed himself drinking some kind of potion that he concocted. And one day, he and Alex are in a in a cellar, and he seems to find a portal. There is a group that can do portal magic. It's very unstable. Their hall is their tomb is on a nexus that's kind of wonky, but they're not even in the tomb. It's somewhere else, and he tries to investigate it, and he gets sucked into it, and he's gone. Weird, he's gone. Nobody knows where he went. She's completely out of her depth. She's new to all of this. This is her first term. She's not an intelligent, well, she's cunning, but not smart. And she doesn't know what to do. So basically he's gone. So she has to fess up. And she says, well, I've lost him. So they make up this cover story that he's gone to Spain. But Dawes, the Oculus Pammy, is completely distraught, and because she's in love with him. You know, every woman is in love with Darlington. And so basically she's really distraught. And the question is, what do we do now? And at the same time, something else happens. And that is that a girl named Tara is killed. Tara is found dead on an empty plot of land in the middle of the Yale campus. And it's unclear how she died. It's actually quite clear how she died. She was stabbed by her boyfriend. And Tara is a townie, so she's not part of Yale. So, apparently there's a difference between being at Yale and at Yale University or being a townie. So if you're a townie, nobody cares about you because you are a breed apart. So again, we've got this outsider coming into a tight-knit society, and that is Yale in this case. However, Alex gets suspicious because she's like, this is weird, and she starts investigating. And she finds out that there is something odd about this. And at that moment, a side plot opens because one of her roommates, Mercy, is going viral on a rape video. So this sexual abuse video makes its rounds, and it's quite clear who is responsible for it. But also, what is clear from the video is that Mercy is under the influence of a magical drug. And this can be tied back to one of the societies, and it's also something that this society can use and does use, but it should never be given to anybody outside, and it should definitely not be used for this purpose. So now Alex finds out that Tara is a drug dealer who, together with her boyfriend, had set up a kind of gardening project growing this particular herb, which this particular society would usually get from somewhere in the Himalayas or India or somewhere really far away, and pay a lot of money for. But they've managed to cultivate it in Yale. And she's selling this drug, but she's now selling it to other people as well. And this guy gets hold of this drug and uses it on girls to make them serve, as it were. And then this whole thing unravels because now Alex has some kind of, well, first of all, she can tie the killing to the societies. The societies are getting hammered by this. It's like really terrible. But also the big question remains, why did her boyfriend kill her? And she's trying to investigate this some more because there doesn't seem to be any reason for him to kill her. And she ends up going to Tara's place, and suddenly her boyfriend, Tara's boyfriend, who is in custody, pops out of a portal in the living room of Tara's place. So it's quite clear that there is something really weird going on. And when I was reading this, I was like, oh my God, this is so much like Dead Zone, because you have this really interesting story happening, and then suddenly a side plot opens, and you kind of go, really? Do I really need this? Can we just basically focus on Alex trying to bring Darlington back? Because that's also what's happening as the main plot. Why does this come in? But suddenly it all makes sense. And this is where Leigh Bardugo is actually doing a great job, because she's tying it neatly together. Because it turns out that it wasn't the boyfriend to begin with. I mean, the boyfriend isn't even a Yalian. He doesn't even have access to any magic. But suddenly here he is in prison, being able to use portals and going places. And it turns out that Tara was actually not killed by her boyfriend at all. She was killed by Dean Sandow, the head of Lethe, who had just gone through a very ugly and very expensive divorce. And now he needs money. And there is a society, St. Elmo's, that doesn't have a tomb, and they want a tomb. And he believes that he can create a tomb by killing someone. And so he decides to kill Tara on an auspicious night in an auspicious place and create a nexus. And on this nexus, then, St. Elmo's could build their tomb. The problem is, it all works except the nexus doesn't get opened. And he's very surprised by this because he thought he knew how to do this, because Darlington had been investigating the creation of the different tombs around Yale, because they were all built at different times. And he ties this back to a particular incident where somebody named the bridegroom, a ghost named the bridegroom, and he murdered his girlfriend, murdered his fiancée in the early 1800s. And she finds some of his notes, and there he says, "the first?" ? And then we learn all about the bridegroom. This is a ghost that has been haunting the places in Yale, and she's been seeing him, and she's been working with him as well, fighting something else, which I won't go into, because there's a lot of action in here that is important, and it makes perfect sense in the story, but in the retelling of it, it's just too much. She finds out that the bridegroom didn't really kill his fiancée, but that something else happened, that they were both killed by someone else. And that there were other women who were also killed over the course of several decades. And she's then able to link the killing of these women with the creation of a new tomb. So she assumes that whenever these women were killed, each time a woman was killed, a nexus appeared. And this is then tied off really nicely when she encounters Professor Belbaum, a French, is she a professor of French literature, or is she a French professor of literature? I don't know. But she's French anyway. And it turns out that she is the original bridegroom's fiancée, named Daisy. And she's a wheel walker. And wheel walkers are people who can open portals into other worlds, other planes of existence, whatever you want to call it, without having to resort to rituals. It's just something they can do. And what she does, what Daisy has been doing for almost 100 years, is she's been devouring souls. And she has been devouring the souls of particular females, namely other wheel walkers. And whenever she did this, a nexus appeared. Now, Dean Sandow mistook this as, if you kill a woman on an auspicious date in a nice place, a nexus will appear. It doesn't work like this. It has to be a wheel walker, and killing them isn't enough. You have to eat their souls, because devouring a soul is delicious and very disruptive to the space-time continuum, whatever you want to call it. And Alex, being a murderer, and this is also what we learn, and here comes the big surprise, Alex cannot only see dead people, she can also pull them into herself and use their power. And if you have a dead person inside of you, you become very physically strong. And she did this when she woke up next to dead Helly on that fateful morning. And Helly was still lingering. And she invited Helly in. And she went outside into the living room, took the baseball bat, and killed Len, and killed Ariel, and killed Betcha. Then disposed of everything. Let Helly go, much to her chagrin, because she wanted Helly to stay with her. Cleans herself up in some Los Angeles river, goes back, is found by the police, and that's how we end up in Yale. So it is made perfectly clear during this book that Alex Stern does not regret killing anyone. The only thing that she does regret is that she couldn't save Helly. She blames herself for her death, but the fact that she killed everybody else and that, you know, they died terribly bloody deaths, she doesn't give a damn. And you can't even say that this is revenge. You can't even say that this is self-defense or defense of another. It's pure revenge, because by the time she starts laying into them, the whole story has already finished. Helly's already dead. It's way past when things were going down. So it's made quite clear that Alex Stern is a killer. And we're talking about a cold-blooded killer too. She has no regrets, no remorse. So in that, she does resemble Lisbeth Salander, except that I think Lisbeth Salander may be autistic. I believe that she's on the spectrum as well, and she has other psychological problems. It's never mentioned that Alex may have those, but Alex definitely has a very callous personality, because she's been seeing dead people. She was raped as a child, and it's all terrible, and I totally get this. She's not a nice person. And she certainly has a moral compass that is different from other people's. Like, for example, Dawes is very much prim and proper, going straight. These are the rules. This is what we do. No deviancy from any of the rules. We just have to follow them. And of course, Darlington, the golden boy, who's still vanished. I mean, even at the end of this book, he's still not there. And basically the book ends with her killing off this 100-year-old soul reaper, and her resolve to go into hell, where she now believes Darlington to be, and to get him back. And she recruits Dawes, and she recruits Turner, the police officer that is the liaison for Lethe. And she also manages to convince the police that Tara's boyfriend is innocent. But what doesn't happen is none of these societies that have been involved in all of this, you know, dealing in the drugs and doing all kinds of stuff, they don't get punished. They don't get punished for the fact that they were paying Sandow to create a nexus for them, and possibly also, you know, helping with a portal magic that would bring Tara's boyfriend back to her apartment to make sure that, you know, he could do whatever he was going to do there. So it is definitely dark academia, because of, you have the occult, you have the academic setting, you have the obsession, you have the tight-knit society that somebody else comes in, you have the outsider, and you do have criticism of the whole idea of this secluded and completely elitist area of higher learning, where you have power based on money, power based on influence, power based on your name, and then plus the power that is derived from magic. So this is definitely criticized, because you have like this big contrast between Alex, who never really had a chance, and then people who burn through second chances left, right, and center. But I will also say that if you compare it to other books, like, let's say, The Name of the Rose, or The Likeness, but also Dead Poets Society, which is not a book, but which is also considered dark academia, there's a lot more action in this book, and there's also a lot more fantasy in this book. So it is, if you take Donna Tartt's book, and you say that this is maybe a little bit difficult to read because there's a lot more going on with regard to the academic things, and you really need to like this. This is more of an action-packed book in the dark academia area, but it is really well written. It is one of the books that it's very difficult to put down. I was really kind of like, even last night, and the same goes for Hellbent, after I'd come back from what I was doing at half 11 at night, I kept reading until 1 o'clock in the morning, simply because I want to get through them, because I do want to know how the story ends. I like it when you have fantasy that is set in our world, where most of the stuff is real, except for the one thing that you decide to put in this case, it's the magic. So basically, Leigh Bardugo, being a graduate of Yale herself, knows Yale. She also knows what it's like to go to Yale if you're not one of the Yale in crowd, because she comes from a very different background. And she has taken great pains to describe Yale and what it looks like. She has made sure that everything is accurate. If she has taken liberties, or when she took liberties or did some stuff that isn't real, it's actually written down in the acknowledgements, where she said, okay, this exists, but this doesn't, because she is a great researcher. She believes in research and in getting the things right that are real, because in my opinion, nothing is a better backdrop for really good fantasy than a well-researched real background. I can highly recommend this book if you are into fantasy, if you like dark academia, if you can suspend your disbelief and believe that magic is real. It is definitely a book where there's a lot of blood and guts, sexuality without consent, or sexual violence, I should say, without consent. And it is definitely for an adult audience. But if this is you, if this is what you're into, if you like interesting stories, if you like a fast-paced book, and also a book that's really well written, where somebody intertwines different perspectives and also different timelines and using flashbacks, but doing it well, this is your book. So thank you all for listening, and talking to you soon. Bye-bye.